I first wanted to thank Jenna for being here to play for me today, Professor Tharp for all of his guidance vocally over the past year, Professor Harrell for her guidance and mentorship as I worked as her TA last year, and also Dr. Crabb, Dr. Sims, and Dr. Sylvie for their counsel as I worked through this degree. This has been an exciting journey for me, and I've really been excited to kind of explore this topic. So I wanted to start by sharing just a little bit of information how I arrived at picking this topic for my recital today. I started this journey about 3 months ago, reflecting on what has been impressionable to me as I have grown as a musician. And I first landed at Langston Hughes because of the incredible impact that he's had across many different cultures and many different backgrounds. I did a little bit of study on Langston Hughes when I was in my undergrad and was excited to have the opportunity to look further into this in my PhD work. As I started looking down the avenue of Langston Hughes, I realized that his stretch reached a lot further than really just the United States and really just people of color. It really reached many, many, many different kinds of people and stretched across the world. And that was very inspirational to me as a musician and as an artist, as I go on this journey on this doctoral program to hopefully reach people, not on the level of Langston Hughes, but to reach people across many different cultures and many different backgrounds. Thank you so much. I was going to come up with a creative way to go with it. That's how I arrived at the text of Langston Hughes, and upon talking with Professor Tharp, I realized that there were many, many avenues I could take musically to present this recital today. And we went on a search together of some different composers that have taken Langston Hughes' text and have arranged them into vocal songs. And we found several, and we came up with the 5 that I'm going to present to you today. And the point of today's lecture is for us to experience these 5 different songs and reflect on how these composers took this very powerful text of Langston Hughes and created the music that I'm going to sing for you today. So, we're looking at 4 different composers who have done arrangements to 5 different Langston Hughes texts. We're going to look at a black male composer. We're going to look at a German male composer. We're also going to look at a black female composer. And then finally, a Caucasian or white American composer who have done multiple things with the great text of Langston Hughes that I hope you will enjoy as I share with you musically today. As we start this journey, I wanted to first set the mood with a little bit of information on the Harlem Renaissance, the time that Langston Hughes was thriving. The Harlem Renaissance is a great era in American history that I've only dabbled in as a student and was so fascinated as I began to research and read about the many things that happened during this time period. The dates that the Harlem Renaissance were said to be in our history are around 1918 through about 1937. This was a time of great creativity and a time of celebration for our African American society and the arts. It was a time where musicians were able to thrive, where artists were able to thrive, and poets were able to thrive. This was a time where all of these people came together and were able to share their great talents with not only the people of Harlem, but the people of the world. The Harlem Renaissance is noted as the blossoming of African American culture. As I just said, it's centered around the creative arts, and it was actually the most influential movement of African American literature in our history. The literature of the Harlem Renaissance is what's most noted and most influential during this time, because this was a time when black writers felt that they were able to really express themselves for activism in our country, but also through poetry and other different avenues, and that their work was really celebrated and praised as they wrote during this time period. I did want to note that the Harlem Renaissance is not just confined to Harlem. The Harlem Renaissance, even though this was a mecca and a place where everything started, this grew and grew outside of Harlem, grew outside of New York, and even grew outside of North America. As time went on, all of the literature and the music and the things of these people spread across the country very quickly and even across the world. I also wanted to note that this was the precursor to the civil rights movement of the 1940s and the 1950s. So this time was very critical in our history to the growth of black society. The Harlem Renaissance is known by some authors as the great migration of African Americans from rural to urban spaces, and also from the south to the north. As most of you know, a lot of black society migrated down to the South and spent a lot of time down there in the late 1800s through this time period. And this was a time where they came into more urban settings, such as the areas in New York, and places where they could be successful and be celebrated for the work that they did. There was a dramatic raise in the level of literacy among African Americans, and this actually forged the creation of many very, very foundational organizations. The first one that most people know is the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the National Urban League, and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Next, I wanted to note that this was a time of economic growth for Black society as well, because there was so much celebration of the arts and people were being respected for the work that they were doing, that this was a help to move the Black society forward economically as well. This was a development of racial pride for people of color in a time that they could feel proud about their race and the things that they had been through, and people celebrating the triumphs that they had conquered. And finally, I listed a few important key people that were writing and performing during this time period. You see the musicians I have listed: Mamie Smith, Alberta Hunter, Bessie Smith, Louis Armstrong, and then writer Sterling Brown, W.E.B. Du Bois, and then finally, Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes was a very important and powerful poet to me as I went through my high school career, because he really inspired me as I grew as a Black man, a Black child at that time, in a very diverse society, to be an individual and to have an impact that doesn't just go around my circle, but is able to grow as I went through college and went through my master's program and now my PhD. And so having the opportunity to read about him and find out about his upbringing has been paramount to me in this process. First, I wanted to note that Langston Hughes' real name, James Mercer Langston Hughes, was born in Missouri. He was born in Joplin, Missouri, and he was the son of James Hughes and Carrie Mercer Langston. And I point out his parents' name because, as you see, he took his surname, one from his mother and two from his father, and he gave his mother's surname as the first part of his name, and his father's as the second part of his name, which I will mention in a moment in this lecture. Hughes was raised by his maternal grandmother. He had a very rough childhood. After birth, his parents split up shortly after he was born, and his father fled to Mexico. He was not able to really embrace and take on the social and cultural pressures that he was receiving being a man of color, and so he went to Mexico to live his life. His mother remarried and moved around Missouri and Illinois, and after a few years of time with his mother, he actually wound up with his grandmother and lived with his grandmother until she passed away. He was in late middle school, high school when she passed away, and so he went back to live with his mother in Lincoln, Illinois, and spent his time there, graduated high school there. Upon graduation from high school, Langston decided to go down and spend some time with his father in Mexico, and he actually went to ask his father for his support in his collegiate education. His father said he would only support Langston if he chose to do a degree in engineering. Langston, already in high school, found a very strong bond with poetry and was on the newspaper staff at his high school and was writing already in high school and knew that he wanted to explore writing and not engineering. However, Langston bought into what his father asked and requested and went up to Columbia University in New York and studied for a year in the engineering school. That only lasted a year, and once that fizzled out, Langston decided to stay in New York, but he just worked odds and ends jobs and started some writing while he was up there in New York. Another very important thing about Langston Hughes is that he had a lot of different positions that allowed him to really travel the world and have many experiences. Langston worked as a crewman on the SS Malone in 1923, which allowed him the opportunity to travel to West Africa and also to Europe. Langston spent some time in Paris and did some writing while he was in Paris. And after that time, he decided to come back to the United States, and he entered Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, which is a historically Black university. He finished his time there in 1929, graduating, and in the same year was able to publish his first novel, the Not Without Laughter. Hughes died from complications from surgery. He got prostate cancer in his later years and was having abdominal surgery and unfortunately passed away as a result of that surgery. but the impact that he had on our society was immense, and he's obviously still talked about and celebrated today. Here are a few of Hughes's key writing pieces that he was celebrated for, and I just chose a couple to note today. The first was his very first published poem, which was "The Negro Speaks of Rivers." And this was in the Crisis magazine, which was the magazine that was put out by the NAACP. And he was highly praised for this work. This is kind of what first put him on the map as a writer. Secondly, his poem, "The Weary Blues," won him first prize in the Opportunity magazine, which was a literary competition at the time. And this provided him a scholarship to attend Lincoln University, where he was able to get his degree. Finally, Hughes was one of the earliest innovators of the new literary art form called the jazz poem. Jazz poetry was the style that the Weary Blues, that I'm going to be performing later, was written in. And a jazz poem is a poem that's written to the rhythms of jazz music. And even though it's spoken, it's supposed to be presented as a jazz musician would sing a jazz song. So this style of writing became very popular and was first started during this time of the Harlem Renaissance through Langston Hughes. And then finally, Langston Hughes' legacy. Langston Hughes is known as a leader of the Harlem Renaissance. He's also known as an activist to the people of color, and he was very, very prideful of his race. And also to note that Langston Hughes was multiracial. He was Native American, he was Irish, he was black, and he was also Indian. And he had a very long foundation of heritage in him, but he really, really connected to his black roots and his African American roots and stood firmly behind that as he wrote and as he presented to the people all across the country.